Sup guys? Sorry for the inconvenient video. My previous Half-Life 2 video was inferior to the one you are about to see in my opinion. The reason you had to wait so long was because I had to get a better editing software and a USB adapter for my new computer so I can make videos for you guys that won't take fucking 4 days, and they will instead take longer because I'm trying to make better quality. Now that that's out of the way, let's begin with my review of Half-Life 2. I plan on reviewing the game and not the game's history, because I feel like marketing is kind of useless thing to talk about. I wasn't born then, so I can't express my feelings on marketing that I wasn't around to witness. The only thing I have to say about that was the E3 demo looked far superior to the final product in terms of weapons and enemy design. So let's jump straight into the game with an explanation of the story, because I'm shitty and unoriginal and have no clue where to start. Before I jump into the gameplay, which will be a long subject, I do want to talk about this game's kick-ass OST. It is minimalistic to a sense that it isn't overwhelming, say to a soundtrack like Doom's, even though I love Doom's soundtrack to death. The soundtrack in Half-Life 2 is kind of chill. However, there are a lot of action-packed tracks, especially from Episode 2, but that isn't the subject today. I do have my select favorites of this game's soundtrack. They do set the tone very well, and each song gives me chills, and I can listen to them regularly, whether it be unnerving, action-packed, sadness, all the music in this game is fantastic. It's not on par, say, with Halo 2 Anniversary levels of awesome, but this soundtrack sticks with me. I enjoy a good soundtrack from a video game, and I've always got an ear out for a good soundtrack. And the soundtrack always enhances the experience overall. And Half-Life 2 has some of the best FPS music I've ever heard. I mean, just listen to some of this. Did I mention this game looks great? It may not be groundbreaking now, but it was cutting edge back then, and I think it still looks good. After all these years, games like Halo 2, Metroid Prime, Super Mario Sunshine, and others from 2004 still look great. That's because games need a consistent art direction to be visually interesting, and I'd say Half-Life 2 looks very consistent and intriguing. The art style looks fitting for this game, and the setting this game takes place in. The characters have very realistic facial features. While they don't look very realistic now, they still look nice, and it surprises me that this looks better than Halo 2. I don't even want to begin to discuss the mediocre shooting of Half-Life 2, especially for PC players. For console players, we have it good, because the gunplay is enhanced with the rumble feature on. On PC, mice don't have that luxury, unless you have some sort of special fucking mouse with rumble in it. Also, I've noticed the game sounds better on console for me. I don't have a clue why, but on console the frame rate stays at an otherwise stable 30 FPS, rarely dropping. So let me get into the thick of the gameplay, which involves quite a few physics things. Half-Life 2 used the Havoc physics engine. This engine is used in quite a lot of video games that use physics. Halo 2, Doom 3, Dark Souls, pretty much any video game that has physics. Half-Life 2 was the very first game to abuse this engine like a fucking sex toy. Wow, that was a horrible comparison. Anyways, you get what I mean. In Half-Life 2, you can pretty much pick up anything that isn't stapled to the floor. Cans, boxes, pallets, tons of other shit. And when you get the gravity gun, you can shoot enemies with those objects you can pick up. It's very useful and satisfying to pull off. You can pick up stuff and use it as a shield to get a leg up. And you can shoot saw blades at enemies when they offer them to you. Since Half-Life 2 abuses the physics engine to the limits, you look around and your fucking gun struggles to stay in your field of view. It's so funny to look at, and it's part of Half-Life 2's gameplay and charm. Because when you look around, the gun just moves so much, especially with high sensitivity. It's just hilarious. The physics gameplay is so diverse. You can barricade walls, pick up turrets, and blast the fuck out of enemies, pull lambda caches towards you, and shoot shit and it flies everywhere. What you can do in this game is up to you and your knowledge on how physics work. You can build bridges, walls, platforms, and a bunch of other stupid bullshit with it. The gunplay needs to be addressed rather than the physics right now. The physics are great, but the gunplay sadly isn't great. The ragdoll when you kill enemies is great, and the crossbow can pin enemies to the walls, which is super satisfying to pull off. The guns do look and sound fantastic, but this gunplay suffers from the same reasons that Halo 4 does. As much as I love the sound effects of Halo 4 and Half-Life 2, the weapons run out of ammo way too quickly. The shooting of enemies is bad. It works fine enough, because enemies don't react to getting shot. The weapons pack no punch, and it ends up feeling like shooting aluminum cans with a BB gun, only less satisfying when you hear that loud tink and a hole left in the can. The gunplay isn't terrible, per se. It is just fine. The worst gunplay for a shooting game I've ever played has to be Medal of Honor Frontline. Fuck that game. Anyways, the shooting is really only there to call it a first-person shooter. The shooting still has its fair share of satisfaction. Shooting the guns is sort of gratifying because of the sound effects. In Halo 3, the gunplay was kind of ruined for me because of the sound design. Why can't you make good sound effects, Bungie? I'm getting off topic here. The shotgun's secondary fire is gratifying. The pulse rifle feels powerful because of the sound it makes when you shoot it. Enemies can fire their weapons faster than you, which can shatter the immersion. But it's not too noticeable. The weapons all range from your basic pistols, SMGs, shotguns, and for a sniper replacement, crossbow? Crossbow? Are you kidding me? The crossbow isn't ordinary. It shoots superheated bolts. Despite the gunplay's faults, the weapons are all diverse and unique. The gravity gun is a gun I already explained, which allows you to pick up anything physics related and shoot it at enemies. The pulse rifle is a high accuracy assault rifle. The SMG, while weak, sounds fantastic. The rocket launcher is cool because it fires rounds that you can point a laser at and it tracks that target down. That's pretty cool. The grenades are thermite grenades and they pack a big old punch. Bug bait is perhaps the most interesting weapon aside from the gravity gun, because this weapon allows you to throw these balls at enemies and the antlions will attack them. That's kick-ass. The weapons are all great. While not as diverse as Doom 2016 or Halo 3, the weapon sandbox you are given is still great. However, the only thing I hate about the gameplay is that some of the later enemies can be total fucking bullet sponges, like the Striders, which are simply a pain in the ass to take down. The gunships aren't as bad, but they are still repetitious to kill over and over. Half-Life 2 has some vehicle sections, and they are the best parts in the game to me, next to Ravenholm and Nova Prospect. My favorite chapter in this game is Highway 17, where you drive the dune buggy. The vehicles have a lot of traction when you control them. That's not a good thing, so when you crash into stuff, the screen shakes like a goddamn earthquake is happening. The gameplay is solid enough, and it has plenty of enjoyment in it. I think it does deserve some credit, but there are far better shooters out there with better gunplay. Set pieces do not determine quality. Sometimes people just highlight the set pieces of a game rather than its actual quality. So the set pieces are a highlight, but nothing I could change to make this game worse or better. So the set pieces make the gameplay a bit better, and levels are open because of this. It's not the level of Halo 3 level of open where there's just fucking tons of shit going on. It is mostly linear progression with a few groups of enemies and other shit you have to do. Like that set piece where you climb across that rickety bridge. That shit is so tense and fun. It does drag a bit too long, but I'd still ultimately leave it in. I wish it had more involved gameplay, but it's no big deal. The level design is decent enough. It doesn't have multiple branching paths like Halo, and it is still relatively good design. The levels do fall in the line of bleak and depressing, and hey, I'm all for that, because after all, some of my favorite games have bleak and lonely, depressing level design. Some of the level design is pretty much good, but sometimes the levels can really fuck with you. I will get into that with the pacing. One of the things Half-Life 2 gets right is its pacing, because each chapter leads into the next one. No pre-rendered cutscenes here. Valve knew when and where to start each chapter and the gameplay mechanics in each chapter, because the first two chapters effortlessly immerse you as Gordon Freeman. And this is really good because the game conveys its story to you without yanking you out of the gameplay. And cutscenes aren't bad, it's just that some stories need to be presented like Half-Life 2 to get it right. Then the game puts you in a standard shooter combat, and just when you're burnt out on basic shooting, Valve gives you a vehicle section. And just after that vehicle section is the next story beat. And after that is the famous Ravenholm chapter. Then after that is another vehicle section. Then you get some platforming. Then you get the bug bait. And then after you massacre Nova Prospect, the game puts you back in City 17. And after fighting new enemies and such. And this game puts you in the Citadel, where the final story beat can occur. Did I talk about the loading screens? Okay, don't let me get too angry. Anyways, the loading screens are short, but sometimes they can really drag. A trademark of the Source engine. If you walk past a trigger, the game has to load out the level behind you and the level in front of you. But if you take no-clip mode, which I don't have footage of, but if you take no-clip past a level trigger, you will see a low-poly version of that level, and it ends after a short distance, so you have no choice but to pass. The levels are huge, and since the Source engine is so advanced, it takes 12 fucking seconds to load in a new area. If the transitions were more seamless like Dark Souls, the pacing would be superior. It's not that bad, but it's akin to someone constantly pausing a film. When Half-Life 2 gets its pacing wrong, the game literally fucks itself, because some of the levels really drag on, like Anti-Citizen 1. This chapter took me 40 fucking minutes to complete for this footage. 40 minutes! Not to mention this is the most frustrating chapter in the game, and it's such a clusterfuck of ass shit. Because this chapter mainly takes place in tight, close quarters, and it is annoying as hell because my allies cannot go through a fucking doorway one at a time. This chapter can be utterly infuriating. One of the chapters I'm also not fond of is Ravenholm, because of the lack of ammo, and zombies are total bullet sponges, so it forces you to use the gravity gun. This chapter pisses me off sometimes, because those fast zombies chase you and annoy the living shit out of me. Fall of Freeman is another example of bullshit because there are so many fucking Striders. It becomes luck at some points on hard mode because the Striders are so fucking OP and are rocket sponges. It is just ridiculous that when Striders absorb this many rockets and the game expects you to fight 5 of them. You have to camp next to the infinite ammo stash and shoot them from range, and if you die, you have to do it all over again. This part pisses me off more than Halo 2 Jackal snipers at times because the Striders are so goddamn OP and spongy. Let's take a look at more poor level and enemy design in the chapter Water Hazard. Even though I really like Water Hazard, some of the obstacles you have to cross with this boat is fucking annoying, and with your lack of depth perception in the vehicles is annoying too, because when you have to make across some pipes, you keep sliding off the edge, and if you fall, fuck you, try again. This game is exhausting, and at the time of my first playthrough, I was already getting burnt out on Anti-Citizen 1. Fuck that chapter. Those are my issues with the pacing, but what about the tone in this game? Half-Life 2 is a bleak, lonely, oppressive journey through the entire game, and if you're wondering what tone this game is setting for you, then look no further than the first chapter. Half-Life 2 is unsettling throughout, especially the character that everybody wonders about, the G-Man. He is a mysterious character who creeps me the fuck out. He watches you from places, and when you go to try and find him, he's just gone. In conclusion, Half-Life 2 is not perfect. I do not think it is the greatest game of all time, nor do I think it ever was. My feelings on this game are mixed. I enjoy it for all it was worth, and I don't think Half-Life 2 deserves the mark as the greatest FPS game due to the lackluster story, shooting, and at times piss-poor level design. And I can see people who don't care for this game are coming from, because if the combat and story don't excite, what experience is there to lie beyond? So my final score is just a good 7 out of 10. Thank you guys so much for watching. Peace.